Jesus taught that God's vision is not some pie in the sky thing you gotta die to live. A captain. Thank you, Maddie. Through the support of the Lay Endowment Fund, we have a chaplain on staff, and we have a parish nurse on staff, and we are learning how to lean into each other and catch the wind of the Spirit, and so deeply blessed are we. Beth, I was just thinking about you. It's really good to see you. I'll read the text first. How's that for a thought? I get excited. This is a great teaching, I have to say. And this is from Eugene Peterson's The Message. Someone, and anybody who's been part of a family, maybe will recognize the first part of this. Someone out of the crowd said, "Teacher, order my brother to give me a fair share of the family inheritance." You've been there, maybe. Jesus replied, "Mister," this is Eugene Peterson, "what makes you think it's any of my business to be a judge or a mediator for you?" Speaking to the people, Jesus went on, "Take care. Protect yourself against the least bit of greed. Life is not defined by what you have, even when you have a lot." And then he told them this story. The farm of a certain rich man produced a terrific crop. He talked to himself and he said, "What can I do? My barn isn't big enough for this harvest." And then he said, "Here's what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll gather in all my grain and goods, and I'll say to myself, 'Self, you have done well. You've got it made, and you can now retire. Take it easy and have the time of your life.' Just then, God showed up and said, 'Fool, tonight you die. And your barn full of goods, who gets it?' That's what happens when you fill your barn with self and not with God." Oof. May God add a blessing to the reading of this word. So I hardly ever tell jokes from the pulpit, mostly because I'm just not good at it. So now you have to be nice to me. But jokes, like scripture, are oral teaching, and this one was told to me long ago by a beloved church member. So Ralph Tarvin, forgive me if I mess up your joke. Goes like this. It seems a very wealthy man knew that he was dying. And because he was anxious about what was going to happen to all of the money that he had made throughout his life, he called to him 3 of his best friends, and he explained his concern, and he asked them, would they do him a favor? Well, of course, each one of the 3 friends agreed, since lessening their friend's anxiety was important to them, especially at such a vital and vulnerable time, right? Well, the rich man's request was this. He was going to liquidate all of his assets, and he would then divide it into 3 parts. And what he wanted from each of his friends is that they would find a way after the funeral to slip the money into his coffin so that he could rest for all eternity in the presence of the money that he had made, that he had given so much of his life to make. Well, the man died, and the day of his funeral arrived. And after the funeral and the burial, the 3 friends had a chance to talk to each other. Knowing the strangeness of the request and knowing the temptations that the request presented, They wanted to know if each one had followed through on the dying man's request. The first shared that he had put most of the money into the man's coffin. He'd only kept some aside as a sort of carrying fee. The second was a bit put out with the first. He could not believe that his friend had taken any of the man's money. He shared with his friends, I put all of the money in the coffin, just as I was told to do. Pat, pat. Well, the friends turned to the third person, and they wanted to know, did he comply with the man's wishes? Absolutely, he said. And to make extra sure that the money was safe, I deposited the amount in my bank and I wrote him a check for the full amount. Well, Jesus taught plenty about abundance and the reality of how it is that, as the Lorax would say, biggering and biggering our abundance at the cost of our core commitments to ourselves and to others and to our God is soul-strangling practice. And we know the truth of this lesson in our very guts, don't we? So what good does it do, we wonder, to build bigger barns or ballrooms when there are human beings starving in Gaza? What does it mean that forces within this country are cutting off food and health care and housing whilst dismantling public radio and television and defunding schools and science and environmental protections and rewriting history? Who is building the bigger barns right now? And what is it costing us, each and all? Cooper and I went to see Cabaret on Friday night. How many of you have seen it? I had never seen the show before, and I certainly had never seen it presented with the stunning storytelling power of the Guthrie Theater. If you have not seen Cabaret yet, consider that your assignment for the summer. Because Cabaret is a tale for our time. The world of cabaret, the world of distractions and pleasure-seeking and insistence upon and an almost frantic desire to deny the realities of what is going on around us. The temptation to look away was real in Germany, leading up to the death dealing of Nazism. That life, the cabaret life, we don't have to be invited into that life. Come, hear the music. We are living that life in so many heartbreaking ways. In the midst of so much that breaks our hearts, and in the presence of a sense, you can feel it, can't you, of impending doom, we so powerfully want, of course we want, to continue the party inside our churches and inside any enclave we can believe is safe. And we want to pretend that if we distract ourselves enough, we will not have to stop long enough to name that our house is on fire. The smoke from the Canadian wildfires smarts our eyes and our hearts. Our neighbors, as Dennis prayed in the prayer, are being rounded up and they are being held in concentration camps without due process here in the land of the free. Did you ever think you would see this happen? Never. women's rights and gay and lesbian and bisexual and transgender rights, and the rights of people of color, and the rights of our children, and the rights of the people, all of us, to participate in systems of government are all being, it seems, systematically dismantled. And we who are the people of Jesus Christ, we're feeling the grief of these days, aren't we? We have to feel. We must feel the grief of these days. And in order to sustain ourselves, we turn to questions of how it is we want to fill our barns, not with the pursuit of more and more things and activities that we believe just might distract us enough to keep our hearts from breaking. What we want to consider is what it means to fill the barns of our hearts, right, with God and with God's vision for each and for all. So how do we do that? I come to church looking for wisdom and a way. I trust you might as well. Joanna Macy, anybody read her, is a beloved Buddhist teacher who died recently. She's passionate about issues of justice and the ecology. And her teachings have been held closely to the hearts of many of us through the years. Recently, one of her teachings was shared in a way that makes it feel so timely, because perhaps it could break through the power of denial and maybe move us to healing and hope. She shared this ancient prophecy. It's called the Shambhala Warrior Prophecy. I read it to you. There comes a time when all of life on earth is in danger. At this time, two great powers have arisen. These are the barbarians. One is in the Western Hemisphere and one is in the center of the Eurasian land mass. And although these two powers have spent their wealth in preparations to annihilate each other, they have much in common. They have weapons of unfathomable death and devastation, and they have technologies that lay waste our world. It is in this time when the whole future of sentient life seems to hang on the frailest of threads that the kingdom of Shambhala begins to emerge. Now, you can't go there, for it's not a place. The kingdom of Shambhala is not a place. And it's not a geopolitical entity. It exists in the hearts and in the minds of the Shambhala warriors. Nor can you recognize a Shambhala warrior when you see him or her, for they wear no uniform, no insignia, they carry no banners, they have no barricades on which to climb to threaten the enemy, or behind which they can rest to hide or regroup. They haven't even any home turf, for always they must move on the terrain of the barbarians themselves. They are in the midst of life. Now the time comes when great courage, moral and physical, is required of the Shambhala warriors. For they must go into the very heart of power, into the pits and pockets and citadels where the weapons are kept, in order to dismantle those weapons. To dismantle them in every sense of the word, they must go into the corridors of power where decisions are made. Now, the Shambhala warriors have the courage to do this because they know that these weapons are mind-made. These weapons are made by the human mind, and they can be unmade by the human mind. The Shambhala warriors know that the dangers that threaten life on earth are not visited upon us by extraterrestrial powers or any satanic deities or any preordained evil fate, but they arise rather from our own choices, our own lifestyles, our own relationships. So in this time, the Shambhala warriors go into training. Macy goes on to say that the weapons of the Shambhala warriors are these: compassion and insight into the radical interdependence of all of creation, the clouds linked one to the other. To be a Shambhala warrior is to choose not to be afraid to encounter the suffering of the world. How many of you are afraid your hearts can bear this? I am. To be a Shambhala warrior, to be a follower of Jesus Christ, is to know that the line of good and evil runs through every human life, no exceptions. Good and evil run through your life, and good and evil run through my life. And ours is not to run from the world. Ours is to run into the world, to be present to the world, to actively live our membership vows, which say that we will resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves, and we will use our prayers, our presence, our gifts, our service, and our witness in order to bear witness to a power greater than fear and isolation and fracture. Jesus taught that the vision of God, a world in which the vulnerable are protected by the community, a world in which we recognize the sacred beauty in each human and non-human thing we encounter, a world in which all feast at the table of God's abundant grace. Jesus taught that God's vision is not some pie in the sky thing you gotta die to live. Jesus taught that God's vision is meant to be lived right now, in this life. We don't need bigger barns. What we need is compassion. We need to feel the feels and own the power that God has, that we can be courageous forces of love in the world who will not hide. We come to this church to learn the ways of compassion and connection. And sometimes we come to this church because we can't imagine where else we'd be, because we're so heartbroken and tired that we just have to put ourselves somewhere where we can hear hope. We come to this church because we believe that God calls us on behalf of our children to protect and honor the stunning creation, the stunning, irreplaceable beauty of Lake Superior, and the glory and sacred beauty of all of creation. I can't stand in this pulpit without naming the grief and the overwhelm of these days. I simply cannot. I'm not that kind of captain. This church is a place where we encounter and remember together the teachings of Jesus. And we hold those teachings close to our warrior hearts. And we share the Holy Communion of bread and juice and hope and compassion. And we light candles. And when we die, we don't want somebody to bury us with all of our money. When we die, we want to be buried with stories about how it was we lived and filled the barns of our lives with love. Recently deceased poet Andrea Gibson says this: "In the end, I want my heart to be covered by stretch marks." May it be so, beloveds. May it be so. Amen.